आज से हम डॉन न्यूज़ और एडिटोरियल भी स्टार्ट कर रहे हैं। जो वन लाइनर नोट है उससे स्टार्ट करते हैं। नंबर 1 है बिल फॉर प्रोटेक्शन ऑफ मीडिया पर्सन्स प्रेजेंटेड इन सिंध असेंबली. The journalist and other media practitioners shall have protection against disclosure of professional sources of information under the Sin Protection of Journalists and Other Media Practitioners Bill 2021 that also bars government officials and institutions from forcing them to disclose the identity of their professional sources. According to the draft of the new media law, the protected information gathered by journalists and other media practitioners includes, but is not limited to, information gathered in the field through interviews or personal observations, telephone conversations, and information gathered online or through digital platforms. Number 2, WHO urged to help resolve vaccine acceptability issue. The Pakistan Medical Association (PMA) has urged the World Health Organization to play its role in getting all vaccine acceptable by countries which have made it mandatory for visitors to be uh, inoculated by certain brands only. On the other hand, as the number of positive cases among passengers from the UAE and Bahrain is increasing, the National Command and Operation Center (NCOC) has decided that only polymerase chain reaction (PCR) results of authorized laboratories will be accepted. Third, Pakistan wins WHO's award for anti-tobacco campaign. While anti-tobacco advocates have been criticizing policies of the government and its failure to implement the pictorial health warning, the PHW, since June 30, 2020, the World Health Organization (WHO) Regional Office for the Eastern Mediterranean has announced the World Number Tobacco Day 2021 award for Pakistan for its effective anti-tobacco campaign. WHO was asked to nominate individuals or organizations from each of the 6 WHO regions for their accomplishments in controlling tobacco use. Number 4, Pakistan to continue giving air-ground access, says Pentagon. Pakistan has allowed the US military to use its airspace and given around access so that it can support its presence in Afghanistan. According to a Pentagon official, David F. Halvey, Assistant Secretary of Defense for Indo-Pacific Affairs, told the US Senate Armed Services Committee last week that the United States would continue its conversation with Pakistan because it had a critical role in restoring peace to Afghanistan. UN calls for political process and Gaza reconstruction. A UN official in Gaza on May 23, 2021 called for a genuine political process to avert further bloodshed after Israeli atrocities ravaged the Palestinian enclave. As thousands of Gazans slowly tried to piece back together their lives, two top UN staff visited the territory after an Egyptian-brokered ceasefire on Friday halted 11 days of bombardment. India battled fungal threat as virus death near 300,000. Doctors in India are fighting a fatal fungal infection affecting COVID-19 patients or those who have recovered from the disease amid a coronavirus surge that has driven the country's fatalities to nearly 300,000. The life-threatening condition known as mucormycosis is relatively rare, but doctors suspect that the sudden increase in the infection could further complicate India's fight against the pandemic. Shamed BBC journalist apologies over Diana interview. 3 killed in shooting outside US bar. France fears apartheid in Israel if Palestinians don't get their own state. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian warned on May 23, 2021 of the risk of long-lasting apartheid in Israel in the event the Palestinians fail to obtain their own state. Le Drian is one of the first senior French officials to use the term apartheid in reference to Israel, which has angrily denied any policy of racial discrimination. Asia Cup postponed again. The Asia Cup has been postponed for a second year after the Asian Cricket Council said on May 23, 2021 there was no room on the calendar to host the rescheduled tournament. The 2020 edition was postponed to 2021 due to the COVID-19 pandemic, but the ACC said a packed Future Tours program made it impossible to hold it this year and it would be held in 2023 instead. England are set to host Sri Lanka, Pakistan and India in various formats between June and September, while the ICC 2020 World Cup is scheduled to take place in India in October-November. ओके जी एडिटोरियल पढ़ते हैं नंबर वन एडिटोरियल है सरप्राइजिंग क्लेम द न्यू इकोनॉमिक ग्रोथ एस्टिमेट ऑफ nearly 4% approved by the National Accounts Committee for the present fiscal year has caught almost everyone, including the State Bank and the Finance Ministry, by surprise. At this stage, at least more detailed information is needed to ascertain how far the figure truly reflects the economic situation. In the absence of an alternative independent analysis of data and growth estimate, and in the midst of the COVID-19 pandemic that has caused economics worldwide to slow down, the projection will be seen as overly optimistic. The NSE growth estimate beats earlier varying GDP expansion projections of 3% by the central bank, 1.5% by the IMF, and 1.3% by the World Bank. Besides, it is almost double the official growth target of 2.1%. This year's surprising growth may be explained, but only to a small extent, by the low base effect of the last fiscal when the economy contracted by approximately 0.5% owing to the lockdown and mobility curbs imposed to halt the spread of the infection. But not many seem prepared to accept the government's claim. There are reasons to be skeptical of the NSE data. It covers only up to 9 months of the current fiscal. The projected GDP growth appears to be based on this period of time. For example, agricultural output is said to have increased by 2.8%, despite a 35% decrease in domestic cotton production. The NSE's projection of the wheat yield at 27.3 tons this year is also considerably higher than the Federal Committee on Agriculture estimate of 26 tons. The biggest surprise has come from the services sector, which has been hit the hardest by the pandemic but is claimed to have expanded by 4.4% against a target of 2.6%. The pandemic continued to disrupt the entire services industry, and yet the latter is reported to have contributed 69% to GDP growth. There is something amiss about the growth in the service sector. At least anecdotal evidence in gross and fixed anecdotal evidence does not support NSE calculations. The Finance Ministry reservation that the 13.8% growth in gross fixed capital formation wasn't enough to prop up the 4% GDP growth rate raises more doubts. Therefore, the NSE estimates need to be taken with the pinch of salt until we have more reliable information and independent analysis of the data it has used to make its projection. Rape cases. Last year, the horrific gang rape of a woman in front of her children on the Salko Lahore motorway sparked protests across the country, with people gathering to demand accountability for the survivor and safety for women. This led to two Anti-Rape Ordinance, the Anti-Rape Investigation and Trial Ordinance 2020, and the Pakistan Penal Code Amendment Ordinance 2020, which expanded the definition of rape, including harsher punishments for perpetrators, and banned the degrading two-finger test for victims of rape, which is also a form of assault. Additionally, it called for the establishment of special courts and rape crisis centers. Despite the approval of these ordinances, reported rape cases have risen to 200 in the federal capital, according to a recent report in this paper, with only one additional district and session judge authorized to look into such cases. Worryingly, around 80% of offenders were acquitted due to faulty investigation, poor prosecution, and out-of-court settlement. While some government ministers were eager to talk about the public hanging of perpetrators, they have not been able to correct the prosecution system for bringing perpetrators to justice. It is no wonder then that few incidents of rape officially reported or pursued legally, as the process can be extremely painful for survivors who have to relive trauma and with little hope for justice. Consider the reaction of then Lahore CCPO's Sheikh Omar Sheikh, who engaged in victim blaming language after the motorway gang rape incident and only apologized after considerable public pressure. Such an approach perpetuates the rape culture, which is defined as stereotyped false beliefs about rape to justify sexual aggression and trivialize a seriousness of sexual violence. It is every citizen's responsibility to challenge and push back against such what beliefs about the world and society. One instructive example comes from Indonesia, where 17-year-olds and Hosniza Saiful Nizam string conversation on the rape culture with her Make School Safer Place campaign after a teacher made a rape joke in the presence of school children. Third and last, editorial rendered stateless. An appalling abuse of power was reversed at the Islamabad High Court on Wednesday. The proceeding pertains to Nadra's action in October 2019 of cancelling JUIF leader Maulana Hamdullah's SCNIC in effect revoking his citizenship on the grounds that he was an alien and had obtained his identity papers through fraudulent means. In a 29-page judgment, Chief Justice Athar Minallah wrote, citizenship is the most valuable basic right of a human. All other rights, whether social or political, cannot be enjoyed if a person does not have a bond of citizenship with a state. The court ordered Nadda that it said had acted in an arbitrary and reckless manner to restore the sanity of the former senator as well as those of other petitioners who had been subjected to the same and similar grounds. It held that the authority did not have the jurisdiction to initiate such proceedings on the basis of intelligence report. State institutions in Pakistan sometimes behave as though they operate in a vacuum where they can bend the law as it suits them. In Maulana Hamdullah's case, it would be naive to regard the fact that his citizenship was revoked shortly before the JUIF's Azadi March on Islamabad to add insult to injury. Parmras